Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here this Friday afternoon. My name is Samantha Becotte. I'm the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory in the traditional lands of the Métis. Well, it has been over a year now since we held our first provincial bargaining meetings from this round, and throughout this process, teachers have remained firm that classroom complexity must be addressed within this round of provincial collective bargaining. As we detailed in previous communications with members and with the media, the Teachers Bargaining Committee has received written confirmation from the Government Trustee Bargaining Committee that the agreed upon language for the joint submission for binding arbitration would request binding arbitration for wages and classroom complexity-accountability framework. The TBC's decision to communicate the proposal to members and this decision to participate in binding arbitration is a direct result of securing a written communication from the GTBC that classroom complexity would be within the scope of arbitration. Consultation with members took place during the last 5 days, and it included an online town hall meeting, which was attended by more than 5,700 teachers, a member survey, and meetings with various internal advisory groups. The overall feedback received through this consultation process showed significant support for the TBC's participation in binding arbitration on these two issues. Following extensive feedback from members, the Teachers Bargaining Committee has decided to participate in binding arbitration for wages and classroom complexity accountability framework. As a result, the current province-wide work-to-rule sanction will end at 4 p.m. today, and there will be no further sanctions. It is unfortunate that despite our best efforts, we were unable to reach an agreement at the bargaining table. However, the joint submission with the GTBC for binding arbitration provides an opportunity for progress on the issue of classroom complexity in order to address the needs of Saskatchewan students. I wish to thank teachers for their solidarity, adaptability, and commitment to our shared goals. This has been a challenging school year, but teachers have always put the needs of all of their current students and future students first. Their support and strength have inspired us through this bargaining process. I'd also like to say thank you for the overwhelming support of parents and caregivers, students, community groups, and businesses through this process. The belief of the wider community in the work of teachers and the value of publicly funded education has encouraged and sustained this work. I am proud that as teachers and as a province, we have been able to position public education at the center of our community and of our community and political conversations. Teachers will confidently present our case to the arbitrator, and we will continue to fight for publicly funded, publicly delivered education and long-term sustainable solutions that address the needs of students and teachers in Saskatchewan schools. So thank you so much for joining us here this morning. If you have questions, please raise your hand and I'd be happy to answer them. Pierre?
Yeah, excuse me. Just maybe can you give us maybe a little timeline of what's going to happen in the next weeks? Are you after the arbitration? Are you going to have a new collective agreement? So yeah.
Absolutely. So we have a number of items that have been agreed upon outside of the two that will go forward to binding arbitration. First part of the process is we need to jointly select an arbitrator for the process. And then as well, we will each select the TBC, and the GTBC would select our own representative to sit within a panel. From there, the GTBC, as well as work internally at the STF with the Teachers Bargaining Committee to prepare our submission to the arbitration panel. And then depending on the availability of the arbitrator and the other members of the panel, as well as the two committees, we will meet to present those submissions, answer any questions that the panel has, and then there would be ruling that comes from that. It's uncertain in terms of exactly what the timeline for arbitration could look like, because a lot of it is dependent on the availability of those professionals that sit on the arbitration panel, as well as the actual arbitrator that is selected, and then the amount of time that it takes for them to provide a report and a decision following that. But what is decided by the arbitrator is binding, and essentially that would become the conditions of the collective agreement on wages, as well as on class complexity and the accountability framework. Alexander?
Hi, Samantha. I'm just wondering if you could give us kind of a little bit of what you think changed teachers' minds over the last few days of consultations, and what you heard from them, and why they feel now that binding arbitration is the right path for them.
I'm not sure that I would say anything has changed within the minds of teachers. We have always, and we still feel that there needs to be improvements to our classrooms and to the supports that are available for students within the schools across the province. We presented teachers with the information of what was there, and especially after the change of wording, whether the GTBC last week, how they had provided binding arbitration for wages and the accountability framework, explicitly getting written communication and confirmation that classroom complexity would be an item that would be discussed along with the accountability framework. That really gave us the assurances that we would be able to present our case and have a ruling from an arbitrator on those important issues that teachers have been talking about for now over the last 3 rounds of bargaining, essentially almost a decade. So like I said, I don't think too much has changed. We have always said that we need to have class complexity addressed, and we want to have it addressed within our collective agreement. And teachers have provided the feedback that this is the best path forward for that process to continue.
Just a quick follow-up. This is, I think, what, almost 10 months now since the contract has expired for teachers in the province. I'm just wondering, I guess, how do you categorize, it all leading to this? It's now all going to binding arbitration. That is binding. The end is in sight, essentially. Is this a win for the STF? How are you viewing the state of things now that this is heading towards an ending?
Well, it is still a potentially lengthy timeline before we get a ruling from an arbitrator, and we do have an end to this bargaining process. But at the same time, we would have loved to see a negotiated agreement that addressed the needs of students and teachers. But we'll continue to fight for public education, continue to look to see more improvements for students and ensure that we can protect them in the long term. I think that looking forward, binding arbitration is a fair, unbiased opportunity for us to present our case. And as I said, I'm confident that we'll be able to present a very strong, compelling case to ensure that we do see improvements and protections around teachers' working conditions and our students' learning conditions, which is, I think, what everyone wants to see. We want to see our students supported in our classroom, and as parents, we want to see our children supported in their education. So we're very hopeful that that those will come through arbitration.
Thank you.
Emily May?
Thank you. I was just curious if the STF is worried about anything heading into arbitration.
I think with any process within bargaining, there are things that are uncertain and there are potential risks, but there's also potential benefits. And like I said, we're confident in the case that we have and the needs that students have to have improvements within the collective agreement that provides those protections around our working conditions. There are several examples across Canada where those articles have been put into teachers' collective agreements in their respective provinces. So we'll be putting forward a very strong case. We're going to present lots of evidence about the conditions in our classrooms and the lack of supports for students in classrooms, as well as the loss of purchasing power for teachers with their wages. I know we talk a lot about classroom complexity, and that is a big conversation, but wages are also going forward, and we're confident that we can put forward a a strong argument to see more improvements around both of those items going forward to arbitration.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then just a follow up. I know before there was some uncertainties about end of year activities. Do you think this will affect grads or end of year extracurricular things?
Well, as of today at 4 p.m., our sanctions will be withdrawn. And going into arbitration, we won't have any further sanctions, although those extra opportunities are provided through teachers' voluntary services. And so that will be up to individual teachers, whether those are services that they want to continue to provide in their school community. And I respect teachers' decisions either way in evaluating that. I know it has been a stressful, challenging time for many. And as teachers' workload increases within their classrooms and within those professional responsibilities, I've heard lots of conversations from teachers where they're questioning whether they can add additional voluntary services or any voluntary services on top of the workload that they are required to do through professional services. So sanctions won't impact that, but I think that teachers will be looking at whether they can add anything extra on top of what they're currently trying to manage within their classrooms.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Sorry if this was asked before. How long do you think this process is going to last?
It's hard to say. Like I said, a lot of it depends on the availability of an arbitrator. Often arbitration processes can last anywhere from kind of 6 to 8 months. It could potentially be longer, it could potentially be shorter, but we would look in that kind of approximate timeline before we get a ruling or decision from an arbitrator potentially.
Okay, and just the news release says binding arbitration for issues of wage and class complexity. Does this, just for clarity, is the entire agreement going to binding arbitration, or is it just those 2 issues?
Just those 2 issues would be ruled on by an arbitrator. All of the other items that have been agreed to through the negotiations process would be still agreed to moving forward.
And when is the STF going to start looking for an arbitrator?
That work happens immediately. I think we have specific timelines in terms of when that needs to happen, but those are conversations that are happening or will be happening, like I said, almost immediately. So we'll be looking at who's available. We'll be looking at who might be ideal from the teachers bargaining committee side. And then, as I said, it needs to be jointly agreed upon with the GTPC.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. There's a couple of questions in the chat I'll go to next. So the government has changed their mind about arbitration. Do you think this is because of pressure from all the sanctions and time that has passed, or is it generally a number of factors? That's a really good question. I could speculate on why I think the government has changed their position on arbitration, but that would be a great question. I would encourage you to ask the Minister of Education of why this wasn't an option that was selected earlier within the process when we offered binding arbitration for classroom complexity back in March to help move the process forward. But at the same time, context changed very quickly, and I'm sure that the government also wants to see a resolution for the negotiations process. So that's what I would guess their change of position would be. But as I said, I would encourage you to ask the Minister of Education to get a more accurate reflection of why their stance changed. And then also you have changed your stance on arbitration after a few weeks ago. So same question, but to the STF. So thank you. I appreciate that question to me. So we did get offered binding arbitration, as I said, from the GTPC on June 5th officially at the table, and they had offered binding arbitration for wages and the accountability framework. With that language, we felt it was too narrow of a scope and it wouldn't allow us the opportunity to fully present the issues of classroom complexity and have a ruling on those working conditions for teachers as well as students' learning conditions. We now have, as I said, that written confirmation that classroom complexity will be an item that will go forward, that we'll be able to present on and see a ruling from an arbitrator within the process. And another question. So was there an official vote from members, or was there a member survey and feedback from the survey that led to the decision? Just looking for clarification. So the decision to go to binding arbitration is a decision of the Teachers Bargaining Committee as well as the provincial executive of the STF. We did do several meetings to consult with members as well as have a member survey to gauge the interest of members going to binding arbitration. Just with the high level of engagement that we've seen from our members over the course of this round of negotiations and the high level of respect that we have for their voice within this process, we wanted to consult with them before we made a firm decision on what path we would be looking at. Because as I said, their voice in this process has been so important to us, and they provided us with great feedback through that process. And so we did do an informal survey, and the feedback that we received from members was in support of moving to binding arbitration as well. Alexander.
Just another quick question, I guess, for you. Can I get you to reflect on the path that has led us here, and just how are you feeling right now with how things have gone?
Well, as I said, I would have loved to see a resolution earlier within this process to make sure that we have improved supports for students as soon as possible. That's what we have been asking for throughout this process. We want to know that our students now are going to have better supports in schools, and we want to know that our students in the future are going to have better support and an ability to thrive in their education. At the same time, I look forward to binding arbitration. As I said, it is a fair judicial process that will take into account all of the evidence that is presented and come to a decision on what will be included within the provincial collective agreement on both wages and on class complexity. And again, I am very confident in our ability to present a compelling case that represents the interests of teachers and can clearly explain why these are priority issues for teachers and the need to see improvements to both of those issues within our collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so not seeing any other hands. Appreciate everyone joining us here on Friday afternoon. I know it doesn't provide you with a lot of time to do the work that you need to do. So again, thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions after the fact as well. And I hope everyone has a great weekend.